Keep it up, you crickets. You just keep it up. You're going to be wired for sound at some point here. They're going to get you. They're not going to start with you. You might actually be bypassed. If you can't really fly, and some of you might be able to do a little bit, you may not have the future technology to even be used. So the future does look like the big boot, what they're promising. And the big boot is being promised because there's something that they know about you, and probably why you're crickets. And the simple fact is that the crickets means nothing's going on. Just so peaceful. While there's a war on for your way of life and your existence and everything else that you understand. Whether or not you want to agree to it, make all the excuses you want, it's coming down. Make all the excuses that you can't do something, make all the reasons why it won't work, and it's coming on you. The point is not making all the decisions about what you can't do, it's figuring out what you can do. Even if it's, I've told you, the whole thing to me at some point, this is one analogy, there's lots of ways to come at this. You find, literally, when you come to the point of it, you find yourself, you're in this battlefield, naked, in the middle of a desert, just like back over Middle East. No, not a tree, one. Maybe not even a little sand dune. And you're being fired at. And that's where you is. Now, you can become a cricket at that point and give up, roll over, go into fetal position, or else you figure out, well, I want to go to another day, but I got a problem right now to deal with. And then the little thought in your head, there's a republic if you can keep it. Then when we look at all that, and we finally get it squared away, that republic, large parts of it weren't so bad. In fact, there's a segment of it, which I tend to deal in, and this is the land, the law of the land as well, not the law of the land that they talk to you about that may incorporate all these judge-made rules, but the law of the land itself is the foundation, and from which we can fight. That sand that you're on, naked, not even nary a sand dune to hide behind, is yours. You command that field, and you're going to have to decide to keep it. And if you don't, it's taken. It's that simple. A lot of people don't want to think of it this way, but it comes to some purpose to do that. In other words, there's no excuse. You've got one way to go or another. And a lot of what's in our face is a big deception. And we weren't quite aware of all that. And I've been coming here week after week, best as I can, to try and give you the insight of what you're up against, whether or not you want to agree to it now, whether or not you want to understand it, whether or not you can at this point, even all this time that's passed. So I think I've given enough to get the basis going that you should be able to find a wrong you want, make right, and make it right, and build out small, even so ever small the problem would be. Start building those successes in the battlefield to understand what you're up against, finding out you're infiltrated and surrounded. For those of you on Prodcast, Pastcast, and then Recast for UCY.TV, on Thursdays, the recast of this broadcast is BTW RLM 217, I think it is. 217. That's for the getting the content. If you hear the broadcast and you put it in a search engine, you put all that, maybe even Real Liberty Media, and up comes the blogcaster, which has all the links I talk and speak to. And I say go read those things, because I don't tell you hardly anything from that. I don't read to you so much. Sometimes I'll read a bit because I want to, and I'll do that today. We're going to go through something today, a little more than I usually do. But I want to show you a deception right in your face that speaks right to, well, when you see what the point is, you'll see it all. You start to see it all around you if you're interested. If you're not, I can't speak to that. But I'll set you up here today. We'll do some reading today, and then we'll go back over to going down the tabs as I do to expose to you the things you need to read in the blogcaster is all the things I don't talk about. And when you read and think about what I'm talking about in the way I'm doing it, I think it becomes more relevant to most people, given you're interested in those subject matters. And that's why I guess go through lots of subject matters. I'm trying to speak to you all without a direction. And so I realize it's almost an impossible task, and I can't be speaking to those of you that don't want to hear it. So, and yet a lot of you all listen all the time. It just boggles my mind. But And this is, I get Ron Steffen over there at UCY.tv 2 hours before this broadcast. He starts his Rock the Boat. He recognized, he listened to one of my prior broadcasts talking to the Michael Schmidt condition up in Canada. Apparently got some good tips, and I hope there was more that he mentioned that I hope they do. They're doing a good job. I don't want to sound too critical. I want them to add what I'm asking on top of what they're doing. I think they're doing a great job ultimately, but there's certain, you can't walk in with your emotions or your perceptions that you think things are going your way, or the look on the judge's face, or this whatever sympathies you may feel. You cannot rely on that. That's not what you do. You got to go and make a record from which you bind the court down, even so the corruption, and even so of their status. You bind them down to an authority. And then in an injunction, it's kind of interesting. It's really kind of simple, actually. You just start pounding on the other guy attacking you for not having the right standing, essentially. And there's certain ways you have to do that. You can't do it with your opinion. And so I'm encouraged by what they're doing in Canada, but I'm hearing just a little bit, and I think if we were to get together and communicate, that you would find we could work those little details out, which is all the difference in my mind, and it's all the difference in what we do. But when you come forward, you start to understand what's going on, you properly apply it. You're in a battlefield and there's an enemy attacking you. You can't say, oh, I can look the other way, and oh, you're working with the system, you can't, what does that mean? How's that working for you? The bottom line is if you're not doing anything, nothing's working for you. And for those of you last week who listened to the broadcast on a different note, not for Ron's sake, or that his purpose of what he was saying, which, those folks understand what I'm saying. I'm just saying put it in a particular form. That form is what I see missing in lots of cases. And the failure to bring that forward is almost all the difference. In fact, I've had another guy I've been working with for quite a few years. He finally came back and said, it's all about these subtleties, isn't it? And I said, absolutely. The subtlety is where we lose it. And it's just a matter of a more proper understanding and application. And what are you doing? Ultimately, you're making that record that nobody can deny. See, everyone seems to make it their opinion, and that becomes lost. You have to make it part of the record. And they're starting to do that. They're starting to move down the trail. So I'm encouraging what they're doing, but you have to understand what they're doing and also kind of step forward on how this gets done, even when you're in the jaws of the beast. And you have to understand how that beast is going to deceive you. And this is, again, behind Woodshed, I try to give you these points that you need to pay attention to. So those of you that heard last week's broadcast, you went to the blogcaster, I titled it Voluntarism Instead of Responsibility. And I hope you thought about that really clearly. I didn't come up with that as a title before. I'll come up with all the title subject matters after I do the broadcast. There's nothing I do ahead of time, except for putting the tabs up on subject matter to speak to you about, which I have built over the week to say, okay, I have a theme, I have a concept, I have a thing I want to tell you over these numbers of tabs. Eventually I want to get to it. Over the time of the broadcast, I want to bring out an idea to people. And I'm using all these different concepts to do it. I can show you can do it anyway. You just put these things together, they can come up with almost all the same proofs. That voluntarism instead of responsibility seemed to confuse some people. And then it seemed to make sense to others. And that's where I was encouraged. It shouldn't really, if you listen to me this long, it shouldn't be confusing what I just said there. Now, however, you all, those that did understand, restated it as you interpreted it. I would say it mostly a little differently, but it doesn't matter. That you got the idea that you're already doing voluntarism when you're not fighting. When you go hide in a cave, dig yourself into the sand, lay in a fetal position, when you do all that, that's voluntarism. When you don't stop the wrong that's being made right, that's not taking responsibility. That's voluntarism. And people don't quite get this. And so your voluntarism is your active participation in your existence and your active denial to anybody else who wants to encroach upon it. And there's the subtlety here is it's not so subtle. That takes an active participation. As I've looked at it, the evolutionary engagement. how you evolve from where you were to where you are to address this and stop acting in the sense that your voluntary acquiescence is deemed to be a presumption against you. And this is when you start, I know those words were kind of odd, but that's the problem. They're not that odd. And when you see, I have a certain mindset I start to get into here as I'm talking to y'all. And it's just the words that start coming out, which do explain it, which sound foreign. And that's another indication you exist in a paradigm that you cannot really trust on your own thoughts. And until you can step out, literally pull yourself back and say, okay, they got me in here. Now, what have I accepted that is not true? And it's this, they are such subtle deceivers, all these people that pull this off. And that's why you have to listen very carefully, and you learn to discern. I'm not, again, it's just how they have us. I don't even want to sound like I'm any judging. I am in a way. I'm judging that you need to step up, but because that you have to. There's no doubt about it. And you're going to find whatever method you have to find that is rational for you, because I can't come up with it for you. And stop any excuses. But all these clues I give you, all these keys that I give you, are sitting there to be used. And that's the other subtlety is, again, the proper use. Don't just talk about your rights. You have to be able to prove and assert them. For instance, and I won't get too deep because I don't want to go on to the Michael Schmidt thing. They have their own thing going. I really do wish I had a little more integration. But I heard they're going to this moral stand that they're taking. Well, I looked at that. I was encouraged by that in a way because it's another place. You can build all these places. You can't just talk about the moral stand in that equity remedy that someone else is bringing against you. You have to establish the moral foundation you put in the record, and you stand by that. The person coming against you cannot resist. And what better yet, and even better yet, what we did in our court case, or what I developed in our court case, is that the system itself could not rule contrary to the position, that authority. That is established in the record, not by your opinion. And so there's ways to get out. I see just the power in people's understanding, but I don't see it properly applied. And that's a subtlety that's not really so subtle. That you provide the moral authority and you show that in the lineage of what's going on, what presents itself as authority, which you can call corporate, or even before that, which would have been an office, and by whatever authority, they are defeated. All are defeated by the paramount authority of your moral authority, which is proven. Let's say just by accident, just by a reference, and I would have to sit down and hear some feedback to me so I can understand the situation a little clearer. If it's God Save the Queen, and we can say, well, God is there. Okay, God's an authority. What book do they agree is referenced in the reference to God that the Queen is subject to? Okay, well, that's the book you use. They'll name it. It's somewhere out there. And the subsequent authority that came through, which would have been from before till now in the corporate, is an occupying force which has to agree to the prior authority. Now, they can put on subsequent authorities until you show them you have a vested right prior to their existence, and now they have to agree to it. So you establish the authority back to, I would assume, the Bible, and show how you had the right prior to all that recognized your right, in this case, to make raw milk. It's the product of a cow, whatever you want to call the darn stuff. And I've had a new thought about the milk, and I don't want to go off to the tangent because it starts to confuse people by being able to play both sides of the argument, whether you throw off the word or whether you embrace it and throw the other one off, the use of the word, by this authority I'm talking about. But there's a way to look at this and apply. All you folks listening, have a thought. You know what's right. What you seem to miss is how you actually assert that beyond an opinion. And that has to do with the rules of how we go through and interact with each other. I'm talking our societies. However you agree or disagree with it, there's a way that we've agreed generally how to respond. And the rules are the evidence is written, and you reduce everything into a writing, or you reference a writing and bring it into the case. So if it can't be reduced, your statements in a court are irrelevant. Your opinions in a court are irrelevant. Everything is reduced to an affidavit or a recognizable evidence that the court can take judicial notice of. even if they're not a judiciary, because you start to step on the prevailing antecedent. Well, I used antecedent in the UCY chat, was the power and authority before. That's all antecedent means, is before. The power that the so-called power that you're sitting before, which may actually be only corporate. International law says they are beholden to those things they can't change, and the prior authority they can't change. And so, but that has to be put on the record, not just talked about. So anyway, we got to move on here to what I want to do today, showing you a different style of deception, which makes you think that these people in current times are working for you and talking in sort of warm and fuzzy terms on things that most people don't even pay attention to. I pay attention to this. It happens to be the law of the land and how it's being decimated by people, by the government, and everyone complains about the government, will not take a finger to step up and do it in the right and correct way. And it's just mind-boggling to me. We have quite a few things I could talk about. I'm a little hesitant because I've told you this other problem. We're infiltrated and surrounded by an agenda, the participants of which may or may not willingly know or know willingly they're involved in advancing. The dynamic of which and the method they use in their analysis, I've explained all of this in the past broadcast, we'll listen to what you say that's right, we'll take it, we'll twist it, and then re-promote it as wrong and convince other people, and they got the system and the numbers to do that, overpower you. Your voice, they call your voice, you are just diminished in what you brought in, and they've created an adulteration that no one can identify. And that's because we haven't learned. We talk about Constitution, we talk about it, but we haven't really understood how it's really supposed to apply. And then they made a question on that, and they returned that to the so-called judiciary, which was a part of it. And not many people know how to address that, and even if you do, then they go silent and you don't get there, so you have to have other things that come to bear. Again, this is a war. And the occupiers are in the place. So you're going to have to anticipate all these things that look like defeats might actually be wins, so you get your win in different ways. I'm feeling like I'm going too fast again. I talk fast. I can just tell you I got an image in my mind of what this thing works. I got the answer, folks, is right there in my mind, and I'm trying to convey it to you, and I just go like a freight train. And I don't even know if half of you understand or even 99% of you understand what I'm talking about. I know a few of you are getting it. So I was encouraging, even just a couple. It doesn't take many to kind of get me fired up. Voluntarism instead of responsibility. That's a super big one. And it just came out. I wish I had that statement last week during the broadcast. I don't. This stuff comes to me after. What am I going to call this show to give it some, what is the theme of the overall show? And that theme was to show you that your failure to address, your acquiescence, is volunteering you into that thing which is hurting you. And now you don't have a complaint. And it was to do otherwise, to not allow that was to take responsibility. And it's really that. I said, take the ring out of your nose, stop walking as an accessory to the crime against you, is that statement right there. And the more I think about that, I get a little smile in my mind about, I'm really pretty consistent. And I am working hard to find different ways to use different words to come out with the very same principles underlying what we do, what we find and may learn behind the woodshed had we had the benefit before. Now, some people will confuse that. Well, then you like government. Well, government's a framework. Are we going to get people in the places of these things to enforce what the will of the people actually is for all of our own good? Is the question, and that's us stepping up in responsibility, not volunteering ourselves into acquiescence. And there's not many people that want to do that. And that's a little bit of a sad thing, a little bit of dismay, but I may leave this place with that knowledge. It just wasn't for us right yet. We're really maybe not worthy. We're only worthy to have the revolution come right around in that circle wheel, that circle that we call the wheel of history, and return and repeat it, because we're not worthy. I'm hoping better, but I can only do so much. And so I want to point out some other things. On the first part of this is just a communication by the government to y'all. It's just what they tell us. But there's a whole thing inside it. I told you, when you have a different knowledge base, when your knowledge base is more than YouTube, or what you've been told, and it actually went into the libraries and the more appropriate authorities, and you've literally put the time in and read enough and seen the words, you're reading a whole different reality than what may on the surface be looking like to most other people. And it's not a question. And so I'm going to read something that was just issued, apparently out of the Idaho Statesman, by our new, administrator in the Secretary of Agriculture, or the administrator of the Department of Agriculture. I'll go down to the bottom now first because I don't remember. I don't pay that close attention. It doesn't matter to me. But all I know is I'm dealing with someone in an office, and they have to deal with that and me when we get there in that capacity. Or I can get them out of that capacity and find that they're coming under color, and that's a felony. Sonny Perdue is the U.S. Secretary of Agriculture, or the Department of Agriculture. So, what's important about this? What will be important about this is I'm going to try and read without interference the words of this statement. And you have to understand this is a guy who President Trump just installed in this capacity, that was said to have helped and be promoting getting to America to work again. And I'm going to read through this thing and take it for what it's an open letter to everyone. Just take it for what it is. And then I'm going to go back and in just a few areas, I'm going to show what you may or may not have seen, which moves everything in through a different awareness. And you need to know that if you're going to address this. This is the same thing they do just about everywhere, how this works. And that's why, for me, it's something I deal with all the time. It's easier for me to speak to it. I don't have to learn this new subject matter to prove I already understand what they're doing. I'll just stick to this. I hope you can follow me on that point. In other words, what I'm saying is you may not be interested in the Forest Service or the forest or the trees or the timber, or that all that produces all the wood and other product out of the wood that makes your life what it is. You may not be interested in all that. But this is the battlefield weapon they use that you need to be able to identify as being used against you, because if you ever do get into land and property or become a leasee or even rent, you can acquire the rights of the landowner that you're paying for if that's in your contract for using the land. You can rely on that to protect you against these things that I'm going to read about. This is the thing. Well, I'm going to stop right there. I was going to go on and tell you what else. But let me read this thing through. It's only about 5 or 6 paragraphs, I suppose. Let me look. Yeah, whatever. It's a few paragraphs. And it goes through, and it sounds pretty cool. I mean, at first blush, it looks really, really good. But here's the problem. Herein lies our problem in not recognizing the danger. And it is the method that they're using to destroy us. The Idaho Statesman by Sonny Perdue starts out and states, today's challenges for the United States Department of Agriculture are many, but the department is staffed by tens of thousands of dedicated civil servants who share a love of the land, and for those who earn their livelihoods by providing the food, fiber, and fuel needed at home and abroad. Key assets for this quality of life are this nation's forests and grasslands. Forests covering approximately 1/3 of the land in America. To manage this vast resource base, the Forest Service works with local governments and private entities to ensure the health and sustainability of our wood resources. As with any asset, however, those charged with the task must ensure there is a balance. Thus, it is time to review how the Forest Service is accomplishing its mission and to reassure the American people that there will be balance in how our forests are managed. The ideal management of our public lands would be through shared stewardship, meaning federal agencies would communicate, collaborate, and coordinate with state and local governments and with citizens on how best to manage our public lands. The Forest Service has fully embraced this approach. After all, who knows local conditions better than those who are involved at the local level? So then, what will the Forest Service do in the future? And I was remiss not to give you the title of this. The title of this is Ag Secretary Directs Forest Service to Coordinate with Local Governments. I want to repeat that because you just heard the word coordinate in that last paragraph, and that's what called my mind. I was remiss to give you the title. Ag Secretary Directs Forest Service to Coordinate with Local Governments. And you heard that in the point where they talk about collaborate and coordinate with the state and local governments and with citizens on how best to manage our public lands. Okay, I want to recall you that. I apologize for the interruption. Now we're going to move on to the rest. The first, how are they going to deal with this in the future? First, this is a directive now, so we got to pay attention to it. This is the general of that department saying how the troops are going to work. First, it must reorient its culture to embrace a generational approach to responsible forest management. Trees take decades to grow to maturity. We must think about how the forest will provide cleaner water and air, more biofuels, and more useful products for consumers. If we do not take the long view, we will never be able to preserve delicate ecosystems or prosper from the thousands of jobs that our forests could provide. We must treat our forests so that we are not spending more on fighting fires than we are on making sure that our forests are healthy. This is a critical statement right here within context of something they say in the next paragraph. I'm going to repeat it. We must treat our forests so that we are not spending more on fighting fires than we are on making sure that our forests are healthy. Second, the Forest Service will work to establish interagency cooperation, this is interagency cooperation, to ensure that procedural and regulatory barriers can be diminished or eliminated. The USDA must have interaction with the Departments of Interior and Energy and agencies such as the EPA, the Council of Environmental Quality, the Corps of Engineers. Internally, we must find ways to make good neighbor authority more than just a slogan, so there is more flexibility to achieve true shared stewardship. Third, the Forest Service must engage at the local level on every issue. Everyone must have a voice in the decision-making. At the end of the day, we must all remember that we must do what is the best interest of the American people. Finally, we must never lose sight of the fact that if we take care of the land will take care of us. We have world-renowned scientists and researchers engaged at the USDA, and only the best science and data will inform our decisions. This summer, consider including a visit to the nearest national forest. These wonderful areas belong to American people, and the forest is the job, and the Forest Service is on the job to keep these wonderful resources healthy and resilient for generations to come. Sonny Perdue, signing. So, sounds pretty good. Reduce the regulation, going to keep everything healthy, no more cut back on fires. We're going to actually be using a good neighbor authority. And come on out in the national forest, y'all. As I go through a couple of things there, and they talk about how they're going to do it with the title, coordination. Now, we talked about coordination. It's actually in the FLTMA, the Federal Land Policy Management Act of 1976. But I'm going to remind you something about the law and the rules. The title doesn't actually mean anything. The title of anything doesn't actually mean anything. It could be a guidance, and it may fulfill, and it may be accurate, but it doesn't stand in law to mean anything. And I'm going to show you why that became important here, where they talk about the Forest Service to coordinate with local governments. Remember, though, they talked about also and private entities. And so, my eyes see a whole different thing. And I'm only going to talk in a short amount of points. There's so much more to talk about than I may talk about here. And when finishing reading that, And I don't know about you. I don't know what you felt about that. It sounds like they're going to open this thing up. They're going to reduce the agency's interference. They're going to come and get from citizens their voice so that everyone's heard. What my observation immediately on reading that was either Sonny Perdue doesn't understand the condition, this condition that we live in that's destroying our production. Even though they mention it, the production of all the fiber and fuel and raw materials, they mention it. And you notice they mentioned livelihoods in connection with that, but later on in the document they talk about jobs. Jobs are economics. They aren't livelihood from production. Jobs are the derivatives of the economy, are the offspring uses of the economy, from which are gotten by the development of production. Livelihoods come from production, jobs come from economy. You saw the shift, or you heard the shift in that document. Now I say either Perdue doesn't understand the conditions, or he does, and he's just another production destroyer and a closet environmental terrorist. I just put some notes to keep track here, because there's so much to go on and on about. Either this guy has no clue, and this paper was actually written for him that he just undersigned and went on something that he believes sounds good, like we would if we just read without eyes to see. Or he's a destroyer. Now, how would I say that? Because, well, they're going to reduce regulation, they're going to get you out in the forest and all this other stuff. Oh, they're going to bring people together and multi-use, all this other stuff. Yeah. You didn't hear about multi-use there. It's for a reason. But we're going to have a voice now. So my view on this is I don't think, and I'm not sure anything has changed within the culture of Department of Agriculture, except that it's a headline directive to coordinate. The point about this is on that title, that their Forest Service is to coordinate. We people, and you need to, if you got governments like Jefferson Mining District is a government here. It's a local government. It's not just a people, which actually have no power. All people have is a voice of input underneath a capacity under the direction of the agency. Governments, although, have a seat at a coordination meeting. And coordination in 1976 was defined essentially as an undefined condition. But the whole purpose was to have the federal government agency plans and projects and demonstrations not interfere with the 10th Amendment rights in the Constitution, which is typically protected by your local counties. And coordination says the agencies seek out anyone with the capacity of a government, or in the context of the government in the states, their districts like water districts, taxing districts, library districts, to meet with every one of those to see what the input of the needs and the so-called values and the law and the other things of that local society, that local group of people, the populace, have as their right to be protected, and the federal agencies are not to overcome. That is all coordination is. This is an obligation on the government agencies to go do this. And if you set a record that they haven't, you can shut down any plan, project, demonstration, or any action that they tend to do. Now, this is newfound knowledge to most counties. So this is not something I'm saying is quite knowledgeable, but we have been instrumental in getting quite a few governmental aid bodies understanding what this is as Jefferson Mining District implements it. We have an understanding about it. Where most people have a question, we have a pretty decent grasp on how this works. This is a mandate on the federal agencies to comport its actions to the 10th Amendment or your local rights and needs and values. This is not a wish list. This is not a guessing by golly. This is just not some voice in the wilderness that they take as input to throw in the garbage can. Coordination is the 10th Amendment. It's congressional recognition that the federal government cannot interfere with the local government. This is dealing in public land management, and it's also dealing in public land disposals. So the title that the Forest Service is to coordinate is a pretty good statement that caught a lot of people's attention. But the text starts to sap that energy pretty quickly. And the title doesn't mean anything, actually. It doesn't mean anything in the law, and it doesn't mean anything in this article. But we can use it by saying, okay, well, it says at least to coordinate, and now we have to know our rights. The rights we have are the rights we assert. Who is we? We is your county government, is your districts. That's we, not you. It's the governments that have the obligation and duty to protect you. That is the fulfillment of the Declaration of Independence and the preamble as well. If you start looking back at all this, it starts to make a ton of sense. This is not a request that you make for the federal government to help you and, oh, hell, give us more, don't hurt us. No, this is the recognition they're not supposed to be hurting you. And the notice came out that it looks like, oh, well, they're going to start doing the law now. I don't know if you missed it or not, if it kind of hit you kind of funny. You never heard anything about the law being mentioned in this conversation, did you? Not one time. So we can use the word that's coordination, but I'm not sure it's going to actually change anything under the hood. This directive does not change the culture at all. The agency culture of non-use and stakeholder interference is what I'm talking about. How do I know it's stakeholder interference? Because they have local governments and private entities. That's not you either, is it? It's not the people. No, these are private entities. But remember my stakeholder discussion. Out of their documentation, the stakeholder is a criminal. The best thing a stakeholder can do is threaten you and interfere with you. And private entities, in this context, local governments and private entities are talking about this method of destruction that's outcome-based, and it's advancing the method of dispute resolution. So this message is already on the wrong foot, and I don't think it will change the culture. What will change the culture is people knowing their rights and asserting them, going to their counties if they're not like a district or don't have access to one, going to the county and saying, you have an obligation and duty to protect us in these areas, and you have to stringently hold to coordination and don't do the next thing. Let me point out something. Didn't you hear that that I read out the little statement, collaborate and coordinate? And most minds say, oh, well, there's coordination. What you don't understand and what you might have missed was this conjunctive and. Collaborate and coordinate means they're happening together. And that was a big clue. 3 little words changed the whole tenor of the coordinate directive. You also notice in this statement there are no, despite the law requiring it, many laws requiring it, you'll notice there's no call to for any of the agencies to immediately issue land use plans which meet the laws, such as improving harvest and access. See, harvest is taking the trees for production, and in the West, and in particularly the O&C lands, which are not necessarily Forest Service, they're BLM, but nonetheless, it's the Forest Service under Section 472 of its rules, of its code, is to improve yield of timber and water flows. That's its main job. Improve, and under O&C Act, you see a sustainable, excuse me, I just said the wrong problem. I was thinking about what other people say. The text says sustained yield. It doesn't say sustainable. And so we heard another problem in how that reads. You don't see any directive to immediately issue land use plans consistent with the law for improving harvest and access, which is another telltale clue they don't intend to do it. Doesn't mean it's not going to happen if your local counties and your local governments don't understand this and assert contrary and just hold fast to the requirements of the law. I hope you heard also the sustainability word, which I slipped out, which is what they bring up, and you heard shared stewardship. There is no mandate in law by Congress, and it couldn't be, for shared stewardship in the way the land disposal was required to work. None. Sustainability of our wood resources, I challenge anybody to find the word sustainability in the laws regarding harvest. They are supposed to ensure the health, but not sustainability. So the health and sustainability is another one of those conjoined terms that do not exist in law. This is strictly in the policy imposition of the destruction of your production. Because sustainability, as we found out, is a method statement that is not law. And it means non-use, essentially, or the regulated use to look at and put forth a balance in favor of the nature. The law, however, says you're supposed to already be in productive balance. Sustained yield is the balance. And they overthrew sustained yield for this stewardship mantra. And so those aren't mandated in the law. And we particularly enjoined these things and a bunch of other things, such as sustainable development, in our lawsuit of 2013. That if you see shared stewardship, you all kumbaya, we're all working together. There's no such thing in law. In fact, the law would take care of any proper stewardship given, that's the word. The stewardship here is an imposition. The stewardship is by their terms, not by the terms of law. It's by the terms of this conservation cult. The conservation cult is for non-use. These people are committing war crimes by doing this. But no one other than myself and a few other people kind of know that to move it forward. I'll remind you again, they stated about this collaboration and coordination. And this is the method how they can impose these things that are not law into and inject them into the local structure. But there's something even more insidious that's going on. And we'll get to that right after when we get down to the good neighbor. You and I think good neighbors are being good neighbors. It has nothing to do with that when you go read the law about it. And yes, there's a code, a law, organized, enacted act about this stuff. Who'd have thunk it? These people are so far ahead of us, it's not funny. It's just serious stuff. So notice that this is this collaboration and coordination statement. Collaborate and coordinate is conjunctive. This in law, it's in law, actually. It's how this works in international law. That's how we deal with ourselves. Is conjunctive. In other words, it's not either or. It would be or. And it would have either in front of it. The conjunctive and means they happen together. Now, go back to what I said about coordination. It's the mandate that the agency was required to go to local governments, and however, and in this case the districts, including the mining districts, the real ones, not the corporate ones. And that's another thing besides the point, but doesn't matter. They're supposed to go and seek out that they're not interfering with the local obligations and duties, the local needs and values, and all these other little things. When you put collaborate and coordinate, you have to relook at this. Because when you constrain coordinate with the term collaborate, you're fulfilling, the courts have decided this, you're fulfilling coordination, but at a status level lower than coordination allows for. In other words, as the BLM desk book for cooperating agencies states, that to become a cooperating agency, or to cooperate, or collaborate, or be a partner, or a team player, when you do these other things and just coordinate, it may not meet the obligations and duties of the local government. There's a warning right there, one little paragraph everyone seems to miss if anybody reads that desk book that even knows it's existent, that cooperation and collaboration may not meet the obligations and duties that coordination provides to the local government. That means that nothing more than the Forest Service does right now. They try to make cooperation contracts instead of coordinating. These cooperation contracts, the courts have said, fulfill coordination. So when it's based on the idea of consent, the voluntarism, even of the county, to allow themselves to take on the status by their acts, by filling out a cooperation contract, fulfills the obligation of the agency to do coordination. based on consent. The local government's consenting to a lesser place and saying that they have no other obligations and duties higher. So this term collaborate and coordinate in this statement by Sonny Perdue is the demise of the power of your local government to protect you. Collaborate and coordinate is the term of destruction because it moves you down at least one notch into something that you can't fulfill as a local government to protect you. And then all the people complain that nothing's going on correctly and why are they being harmed, and they don't understand the mechanism, so they blame the local government. Well, I guess you could blame the local government on its obligations and duties, its breach of those, but really it's because a lot of people don't understand the concept of this. They don't understand that what they've lost. And if they did understand, they'd be telling and instructing their commissioners or their councils, whoever they are running these governmental agencies, on how they did it wrong and to fix that. It's all fixable. So just in the term, when I ran across the term reading that document, collaborate and coordinate, I realized this is not coordination. This is acts taken that fulfill the requirement to coordinate, but are not coordination. So they can say without lying to you that the directive is that the Forest Service and any other agency is to coordinate. If you understand that subtlety there, you understand how they've been doing you good. That they do something that fulfills the need to do what they were supposed to do, and then they can tell you they did it. They collaborated with you, they got your voluntary consent, that consent fulfills coordination, therefore they have done coordination. They have fulfilled the mandate. That I see collaborate and coordinate in this statement tells me we're dealing with the same creature as has destroyed the West and everywhere else that deals with this dispute resolution process. They figured out how to circumvent the absolute requirement to coordinate. And where we have the county commissioners asserting the absolute power to coordinate, the Forest Service and the BLM come to toe pretty quickly. They don't get collaboration contracts. They don't get cooperation contracts. They are then constrained to have to do the law, the imperative to improve harvests and access, and all the other things that make a productive watershed. I said productive watershed, not one that merely looks at the balance of somebody's agenda against what they think they want to give you. Because a productive watershed is a productive watershed to the highest extent, the best extent, not a diminishment, a depletion of it. That was a word, conservation, that was defined back in 1907 or so by the first commissioner of the Forest Service. Conservation was the improving productive capacity of the watershed called the forest reserve. The forest reserves are these parts, these reserved, set-aside places underneath which is a savings reservation for mineral extraction. So it's all laid out if you just go read it. But they can't actually touch all that. So what they do is they get you to agree otherwise through this collaboration or cooperation. So in this case, I'm saying again, it's imperative for all you all to understand this process. This is the guiding process for everything that's going on in your life, everywhere. Everywhere. No matter where I look, I see the same thing coming up. And people don't understand it. They don't understand what they're up against. And a simple understanding focuses you back down to the law, and then you say, no, you just got to do the law. Stop this other nonsense. We don't want to diminish protection. Because the foreign agency is not going to protect us. This directive is saying, oh, we're going to try and negotiate you out of your authority and power. So we say it's a directive to coordinate, but what we're going to do is collaborate or cooperate with you, and that fulfills coordination because you agreed. That's voluntarism. That's not taking responsibility and taking the fast and hard stand. So it's imperative that you understand the process, if your local commissioners don't, or this, to instruct them on the difference between the lesser collaboration or cooperation, or as they call it, cooperating agency, and the greater power of coordination to assist asserting the full obligations and duties of the local government. and that they only insist to coordinate and don't lull themselves to be lulled into making a cooperation contract. And these cooperation contracts, I'll give you an instance here as we move into the good neighbor condition. It's very interesting how these people have figured this out, and I can't tell you how blessed I feel just to be able to see this myself and be able to just identify it. It makes all the difference in the world. This coordinating is collaborate and coordinate. It's just, if you didn't see that, you missed the whole darn thing, and then the rest of it falls into place when you see that's what they've done. It's an adulteration, but it fulfills the law. And that's how they get us. They think we think they're fulfilling the law. They are following. Everyone thinks that, oh, the government's gone rogue. Well, not all of the government. They have to get around this. That's why they've done this. They've had to try and get around the law. And so we come along and we stop that by our suggestions to follow the law. It's pretty simple, actually. And Ron Steffen, again, I should have said, I forgot to carry on. He got the idea about this word terminology, about the dredge thing I talked to you. Then he moved on to the scope and purpose. What have I told you over and over? That look at the law's scope and purpose and bring that first. If the scope and purpose is not over you, you bring it. Because it's not over you. That can be done administratively. You could shut this whole thing down before it gets to court. Well, you bring it now anyway. That's a jurisdictional challenge. It's a challenge against the one bringing the injunction. You bring the scope and purpose of that law. And then you also show inside that law that as I understand again, we're talking through broadcasts. It's very difficult, but I'm picking up pieces, and we'll get this. If we ever get talking, we'll work this out. But then he brings up, he got to the point where, this is what I'm telling you folks, if you listen to that broadcast a couple hours before me, you hear Ron doing what I call grabbing the baton and running with it. I gave a suggestion. He got it. He ran. He started pulling in all these other things I've told you that you need to do. The scope and purpose leads you to the words. Well, how are the words not working right? Once you get to the scope and purpose, now you're building your layer of protection. Well, your words, your scope and purpose on this is wrong. Now the words inside are being misused. And you destroy their whole position. And when you get to the scope and purpose, you can find simple words to destroy it. You don't have to go on and on. You don't have to talk about all your constitutional rights. You just say, you don't have an authority here. This is not the scope and purpose. Where have I told you and the miners that are listening? But in the 3809 rules where they come and say, you need a notice of intent and a plan of operations to go mine. And we go to the 3809 rule, and it says, but these rules, the scope and purpose, is over minerals reserved to the United States. I don't claim minerals reserved to the United States. The rule is not applicable to me. That's a fast answer, isn't it, folks? It's not that hard when you understand this, what I'm talking to you about. Collaborate and coordinate throws it into a whole different matter. This is not coordination. I guess maybe as I think about it, some of you all have heard that. Okay, no, you got to understand how this works. Make this important for at least a little bit. Understand, they do this on other terms in other ways over and over and over, and the answer is so simple to destroy it. And then you learn where to hold fast. So you need to understand this difference between collaboration, cooperation, partnerships, teamwork, all these things as distinctly different but fulfilling coordination. And if you don't get that, you won't understand where to protect yourself, or you won't know when they're trying to deceive you and go there. One of the first things you'll understand is that they're going to ask you for a contract. I can just tell you that because coordination doesn't provide for a space for a contract. It's where the agency seeks out to be compliant with the local law. Needs, values, whatever the list is. So as soon as they ask you for something, you know they're doing it wrong. If they're not asking you for your plan, or your land use plan and your rights and the laws, and you haven't advanced that, and they're asking for a contract or an agreement to shut a road or something, or interfere with some water, right? They're doing it wrong, and you got to shut them down. Your governments have to know how to do that, and it's immediate, the shutdown. Now, there's a statement in there that based on what I've explained to you, that they made a comment. They said the Forest Service has fully embraced this approach. Well, this approach they were talking about was this diminished approach. But if they were actually meaning in the truth of actual coordination without the lesser, then that statement that the Forest Service has fully embraced this approach is not the true statement. If the sole subject matter of discussion was coordination without its other lesser fulfillments. The Forest Service has never done coordination quite right. We have some counties where they're doing it a lot more, and where we have those counties assert coordination, it shuts the Forest Service down. And they don't like doing it. What they want to do is get you in these collaboration contracts. So when you read this correctly, the Forest Service has fully embraced this approach. It's the adulterated approach they're fully embracing. If you don't know that, this looks like, oh, the Forest Service is all on board with this too. No, it's not. It's not. And this Perdue guy is not telling us anything new is going to happen. What we get to do is say, well, you agree that there's coordination, and we're going to stick you to that. We're not going to agree to your contracts. Why is you want to get contract law changes now? It's under administrative rule. You lose your power and your rights there when you consent it away. So right now, if the counties or the governmental agencies, and Jefferson Mining District in particular, we don't give them a miner's inch. We don't move one little bit. They don't contact us too much. We keep asserting the record. We keep the threat that we're going to sue them if they move these plans forward. And I don't know if you pay attention, you haven't heard many plans being put forward since we got involved. I certainly can't tell you that we've had any hand in that to stop all that, but there hasn't been a plan out since we got involved. In fact, they keep pulling back plans that they keep trying to shove down people's throat when we come in and say, you did it all wrong here. And it's helped that some county commissioners have stepped up to understand that, and now they're pushing back. So right now, as it goes on, the Forest Service fully embraces this approach. Well, the approach that they embrace is the one that they ignore you. Or they try to negotiate you into cooperation. As a cooperating agency, like the BLM desk book tells us, the status of which may not meet the obligations and duties of the local government. Now, if cooperation and collaboration, all these C words, don't get them confused. I know it's kind of weird. I think they did this on purpose. If cooperation isn't rising to the level to allow you the power to meet your obligations, why would you enter into the cooperation? I don't know. I'm holding a pause here. Why would you enter into this if it's going to hurt you? But this is what we do. This is how we don't understand. This is what I've had to figure out, and with my colleagues, we've all worked on hard to parse through and parse out. So now we got to collaborate, and we have the coordinate, which is the collaboration's the lesser. That tells me we're in dispute resolution. That tells me we're going to see stakeholders, and so I call your attention now to those private entities. You won't notice in that thing that the private entity noticing that it's a private entity, it can't be talking to men and women. And it can't be talking to the men and women in the condition or the status of a grantee or a land disposed to them. And it can't talk to the people generally. These are literally private entities. And this is consistent with coordination that the people generally or the grantee would not have to be consulted because the government and entities are looking out for their interests, so the people do not have to participate. But that's not what's happening at this time. In other words, the government isn't protecting all the people. And if they were, you don't have to talk to the people when there is the buffer, the shield against interference in the county governments or a district such as the mining district. That's the way it's supposed to work. They're looking out for your interest. Again, the starting of county government in the West was in lots of places a mining district. Mining district were these what they call counties now. And they stood to protect the property owners and the producers inside that district. And those producers each had their sovereign property rights, exclusive possession and enjoyment, including the total entire service within the limits of their claim, is the mining law statement. Each one was a sovereign to that land, if you will, and they came together voluntarily to make a government to protect themselves in that capacity. Is how powerful a mining district assembly actually is, how powerful your people are if they knew that in the county, which we don't. Why you can't diminish your obligations and duties because you're just you're cutting your nose to spite your face. You have to hold to this coordination. And that's why when they talk in coordination, it's between the agency to the local government, because the government has the obligation to protect men and women or the people generally. Why you don't have to be involved. that when you are asked to involve yourself, you're not asked to involve yourself on that side, because the government is supposed to be protecting you. If you're being asked for input, you've now gone to the other side, the administrative imposition side, as a cooperator, as a collaborator. And all the times I've been hearing about in war, times of war, you don't want to be a collaborator, folks. It never meant anything good. So this notice of the private entity being brought up, as we have learned through all the readings and things that I've talked to you about, is the statement means that the Department of Agriculture intends to use stakeholders to continue to interfere, as they can show once they get your agreement to the interference is the fulfillment of coordination, but in a lesser capacity. Now, how do they garner this? Where's the authority for this contract? Well, it's that good neighbor authority they mentioned in the notice. Did you even know there's a code, a law code, that even speaks to this? They even have to have a code. Limited government is so specific, they have to even speak about being good neighbor, but they talk about it in a different way. The good neighbor authority is actually in the law. Who'd have thunk it? You and I think about good neighbors, we just think about good neighbors. They have to make a code for it. But it's not what you and I think it is either. And so you have to go and find what this stuff is so you can speak to what they think or they are acting through. It's not necessarily what you have to understand. You have to know this is what's happening. And then once you see it, you understand the condition and whether or not you want to engage it. If you don't, they will assume upon you the agreement. And so voluntarism is not responsibility, as I was saying last week. They volunteer you in, and they call themselves the good neighbor in doing this. Good neighbor authority reliance is strictly agency administration by cooperative contract. The provisions alone done with the governor of your state is a subversion of coordination. Why is that? What did I say before? Coordination is required so that the federal agency doesn't interfere with local laws and rights and rules and property and values and needs and all this other stuff. So they go to the governor. They go to the governor because this whole coordination is the fulfillment of protection that the 10th Amendment requires. They go to the governor because the governor is the one that can sign that off, that's been met. These cooperative contracts, by their term, has the governor subverting all the local rights before it goes into you to be commenting on. So you've been done before you got started. And your counties aren't going after the governor when they do this to subvert those local powers and say, you didn't have that authority. So let's go and see, what is this good neighbor agreement? What is a good neighbor agreement under this good neighbor authority? This is a U.S. Code 16 U.S.C. 2113A. 4, sub 4. Good neighbor agreement. The term good neighbor agreement means a cooperative agreement or contract, parenthetically, including a sole source contract, close parentheses, I'll get it out, entered into between the secretary and a governor to carry out authorized restoration services under this section. It's a cooperative agreement. Cooperative agreements are the fulfillment of coordination, but do not necessarily meet the obligations and duties of the entity that signs one. In this case, they're taking the state out at the governor before we get going, and they call that being a good neighbor. And when you see these services, this is what we sued in our 2013, these restoration services, these new natural resources services, this is all the public-private partnerships, the private parties, the stakeholders that are part of this agreement, the collaborators. And what these things are, and in one example, are these thinning contracts in the forest. And they talked about fire. Remember, you go to JeffersonMiningDistrict.com, look on the left side, scroll down quite a ways, and you'll find our map that shows the fire danger, fire level threats for, I think it's Oregon or the west side of Oregon. And we show you where this is the map that explains the Forest Service and the BLM agree that they should have you all in Class 3 fire danger, which is catastrophic fire levels. They're not supposed to be a club Class 1. So we've had that on our website for quite a long time. And so they come out and they talk about fire and trying to reduce the fire in the notice, in the directive. But they're going to try and do it by these agreements. Reduce the fire and bring the so-called health of the forest up by these contracts. These contracts are thinning contracts, not harvesting. They're contracts, not harvesting under law. Harvesting under law gives the local government revenue by law. Thinning gives a private entity a contract of payment under administration. They've already admitted they cannot thin fast enough. So when you know that, you realize these cooperative agreements the governor has agreed with before they even get to you, they have defeated the state and they cannot keep up with this police power imperative of stopping the fire. One of the things of which the Forest Service is supposed to do, protect against depredation by fire or insect. So if you didn't hear that going into this, you missed the whole point. You're defeated at the governor, and the governor needs to be attacked for the fact of not fulfilling its police power to protect the locals, both in fire, depredation, insect depredation, and revenue to the Treasury. And it's all done by these authorized restoration services, which are contrary to the law, which requires harvesting. Harvesting can keep up. And then that is managed to a sustained yield, a continuing capacity. Now you can't say you're overcutting the forest when it's going to be perpetually managed to be there, and they find that they can do that pretty well. In fact, local governments can actually do that better than the federal, but the federal's underneath this conservation cult of non-use, so they don't care that the bugs and stuff and the fires actually come through and burn it all up, as long as you don't get it. See, so this is done at the governor's level. This is a violation. This fulfills coordination as well, because coordination's purpose was to fulfill the 10th Amendment. By going to the governor, they do that. Coordinate, you heard that everyone gets a voice. Everyone must have a voice. Use the word must. It was not shall. That's the administrative shall. You must when you get to do so. It's not a shall. They didn't say everyone shall have a voice. It says you must have a voice. In other words, when you look at how the administrative side works this, you're sitting as a cooperating agency, or in cooperation or a collaboration, and you are subject to the outcome the agency wants. And they'll listen. The rules tell you this. The FAC Act will tell you this as well. That everyone must have a voice is not everyone shall, because the agency lead agency, they tell you who the order is. It's the lead agency head that tells you whether or not you can have a voice. And that was determined whether or not you agree to what they want to do as an outcome. So you only must have a voice. You must have a voice if you're going to be a voice to fulfill the outcome. If you have one contrary, forget it. They have the right to disregard you. That's a must. A shall is imperative for everyone, literally. I want to remind you of what my discussions on the MMAC problem for the miners is. It sounds just like that the MMAC organization would be the voice for all miners. This is no different in that capacity than this is right now coming out of sunny Perdue. Cooperation or collaboration does not require more than a voice, which is all that is required subject to the agency's final decision. Cooperation and collaboration is not coordination. Cooperation and collaboration is under the agency final decision. Your voice is your input to that agent, not your local rights. And that's what's killing us now. And what else did they refer to? What was the other statement? And only the best science and data will inform our decisions. What have I told you about the best science? It's that conservation scientist that is really more of a political lobbyist. The preferred best science is the political lobbying under the color of science to support the outcome the agency has planned. We've talked all about this. This is not even new. Why am I finding it in this statement again? If it is that there's a new day dawning on production for you all, actually. You heard what comes out of this is all your fuels and feed. Well, not all your fuels, but I mean your food and fiber. It comes out of these lands. Your timber comes out of these. Well, I guess that's fiber. Your water comes out of these lands. Other products come out of these lands. And the miner sits there as a predominant underlying foundational reserve. All this comes out for your good. This best science is this conservation science adultery. It's political lobbying. That's what they're going to rely on, is the best science and data. What have I told you the method does? They go out and they use their own political lobbyists to gather data, which they bring in, and they then analyze it, and then they come out with how they're going to use it to best fulfill the political object. Production is not politics. It's being subjected and interfered with by politics. And I want to recall and remind you that we talked about this so-called best science, that we identified Jefferson Mining District and our coordinating officer doing the study on the BLM sage-grouse interference, the best science fraud that we identified. So Perdue saying he's going to rely on best science. Anybody that says on best science is telling you he's coming to steal your stuff. And he's going to look authoritative to do it. And I've told you before, when you come under a color of some authority to come steal somebody's stuff, that's a felony. And so, it took a little longer than always. It always takes a little longer. I think it's important. I think it's important for you to hear how that went through. That's all I'm going to talk about right now on that. It's just so much more. On and on and on about what you're not told right in front of your face that people just don't understand. I saw a whole other presentation regarding this coordination. Someone was actually promoting cooperation, and I listened. I really didn't want to listen to the point. I already know most of this stuff ahead of time. In fact, it turns out I did know most of all this stuff, but it's always interesting to hear in particular what's going on. Enough people sent me the link to this video of someone doing this presentation promoting cooperation with the agency as the way to go, using thinning contracts no less, and expose this one act. They said there's something wrong with the way they're describing this. So I look at it. It doesn't even take a few seconds to find out how they've got it all screwed up. And how'd they get it all screwed up? They didn't look at the law in a big total condition of how it all works together. They call paramateria. They got it all wrong. It sounds real authoritative to everyone listening in who don't have a clue, but they miss a couple of steps, and they miss how to orient and put this thing in context they're talking about, and they get to persuade you that they know what they're doing, and this is the way we got to go because I know what I know, and that way it was right. And in fact, it wasn't right at all. This is the same thing. If you don't understand how they're taking us down, the methods they use to take us down, these warm and fuzzy words, oh, come and visit the forest, folks. We're coming to listen to you now, and you don't realize that that isn't the way it's supposed to work, that there's a more powerful, more determined, more sustained way, not sustainable, but sustained way to make this work for everyone instead of just for a few that get these contracts and destroy your forest by fire and beetle. Then you missed it all. If you didn't understand what this coordination is, and you don't understand your city councils do this, the same method on different subject matters, your counties do this, they don't even know they're doing this. And some do, and that's the ones that are kind of interesting to watch. They certainly don't want to talk to us no more, and then you know they're just a criminal. But if you don't get the fact of this coordination concept and how commingling cooperation or collaboration with coordination diminishes that power, is the same thing I'm telling you you're missing in any other thing you all talk about all over these other subject matters. I keep saying you haven't read enough. That's not a judgment. That's a fact. You haven't read enough. It's apparently the difference between me and many, many other people. And I don't put up with it. I guess that's my character defect. I start hearing you talk about this kind of stuff in this way, and we're in a meeting, I'll let you go about 10 minutes. It happens, I can force myself to go to about 12. I've already caught you in 3, but I let you go to about 12, and I gotta shut it down. Why? Because you're talking nonsense. And people are listening to it like they think you know what's going on. And so, in that regard, I am guilty. I just can't handle it. And it's not because I don't feel any arrogance on my part. I'm just knowing I can go just like this on about any subject matter. I hear those words come out, and I can tell you that you either don't know the subject matter or you're coming in to steal somebody's stuff. And right now we're in an environment, I told you it's target rich. It's almost 100% of the time that's going on. So it's not like you're going to be wrong. They're going to be wrong by ignorance or they're going to be wrong by knowing intent. And so you are in a better position right now to get involved than if you keep making those darn excuses. And I just explained to you, so it took years to figure this out. You now have that benefit. A lot of people, getting over thinking about Ron Stevens. Him taking a suggestion I gave and then coming up with the other thing makes my mind just smile. That's who we are. That's who we are to help each other. I give you a suggestion, then you see how you put in all the rest, and you see where it all applies. He automatically went, oh, if that's the case, then this can't be the case, and oh, they're doing that, and we can stop them there, and we can do this, and this is where we now need to go, and oh, look at that. We got them. And that's what I told you a long time ago when I first understood about, like, my first traffic ticket, getting involved in the courts, finding out how to address the courts, even the corruption that they are, and being able to walk into a court and say, I have you people. I have you people. You're not getting away from me. I have to be here anyway, but now I've got you. And it's not fun. It's not, every time I went before the judge, you want to be so big and bad. I don't know why. I guess it was like racing my remote control boat. I had a racing boat a long time ago. It was a remote control big thing you raced on, having, Sunday and Saturday things you went and raced boats, what are they called, races, I guess that's what they called them. Every time I'd start racing my boat, my knees would start shaking. I don't know why. I'm having a great time. But you get under command of something that has all this dynamic going on, and the interaction with all these other boats that are flying around, and you want to get through, and you don't want you want your investment to go in the drink, and you want to at least show pretty well for your talent and whatever time you put in your boat and all this stuff you're doing, and just for the general entertainment. Your knees are still shaking. I don't know what that was. It was just this response to this dynamic. So it's not like you stand up there and you feel like you're all so confident about this. But I would do that before the judges as well. For as much as I despise them, my knees would shake. Why? Because they have the power to hurt you. And I think I knew that inside, but I did it anyway. But I did it with a confidence that I would know how to identify where they were taking me, how this was going down, what they misstated, how I had to clarify it, get it on the record to clarify the subtle commingling of a non-sequitur issue or whatever the rules. You look at the rules, they'll guide you on how this comes out and how to call it out. There was a certain confidence to walking into something that I didn't know anything about. I had just enough knowledge to be dangerous, but dangerous to them as well, and more so than to myself. And that's where I started understanding how you do that. I've talked to you a little bit today on that point. I've shown you how right in your face they can make it look like it's rainbow and unicorns and Skittles and whatever all, and dancing, I don't know, what's the new thing. At any rate, they can make it look like that. Kumbaya, we're going to get your voice. Come out in the forest. Folks, you know what it's like to walk into a productive forest? Well, most likely you're not visiting. You're going to go make a livelihood, and you're going to pull out the stuff that the nation needs. So when he closed that paragraph, did you catch that? Come visit the national forest. He wasn't talking about production by the end of that either. He's telling you that they're going to continue the same war crime against the people as they have been, even though he was brought in and Trump's talking that they're going to help out. And so if you don't know, if you kind of go on the good feelings that you think you have because you see what he says, like the judge looks like he feels for us. Oh, the attorneys don't know. They're talking about how this is not right. And, you're being guided down into the dark, deep forest, and they're going to beat you up at the end. What you have to do is what you have to do, not be lulled into their communication. You have to understand, learn, and discern their communication as the threat that it continues to be. And I'm going to probably be saying this kind of stuff this way until I can start seeing it stop. And the only way I know to see that stop is when you get people to see that it's a problem. And first, that means you have to see it and then go talk to someone who's hurting somebody else by it. Which means you have to be more integrated with yourself than quite a few other things. And so, probably enough there. There's so much to talk about. I mean, this is weeks after weeks of discussion. I could go through all the stuff that's in here. All the word clues. All the meanings of them. And for most people, they don't have this coordination. I'm confused. You confuse me. Collaboration. I can't understand it. That's your problem. And that's an excuse. And I get, I don't have so much patience on that part. When you make this stuff important, it becomes so clear and it goes so fast. I mean, things are just, you take all your innate power and intelligence applied, and you learn how to nail these people for what they're doing. And after you're there for a little while, those people start to disappear, and other people start to show up, which are consistent with the better way to go and do it. We're existing in an abuse. I've identified this over and over for you. Most people that speak through and from the abuse. Most people respond or don't respond from and through the abuse. They deny the authority that hurts them, but they won't work against it, means that they agree with it. That's voluntarism. Right? The responsibility is to understand that, stand up, and start to work against it. And I keep believing the more of us that get the core of this and can look at this thing as fast as just reading it. You just read and see all the clues and what it means. The faster we can turn around and do things and stop the nonsense against us. It's just beyond nonsense. It's literal crime. You're hearing war crime on you. Well, I keep referring, this is international law now. The waste of the resource by these methods is a war crime. I don't make these decisions, folks. I have no opinion on this. It's what I've read over time, and I've read it to you, so there's no excuse at some level there either. And so this is the hype that they put on this. This is how they defeat us. Right, we're looking straight at it and don't see it unless you can see between the lines, if you will. You can see the transparent. And until you get those eyes to see that, we're useless to ourselves. I just put it that way. And you're going to be heading for the bad way. There will be no livelihoods. There's only going to be jobs that aren't taken over by digital technology. And that's what they want. You have to understand, too, this Department of Agriculture, I've talked to you a little bit. I'm going to remind you something. They have the obligation to keep the forests healthy by working them, sustained yield, improving sustained yield. It's improving, not destroyed, improving. They also have that's creating livelihood, not jobs. There could be jobs created as a secondary and tertiary derivative, and that's true. But the main thing they start to produce is this livelihood they talked to you about in the first paragraph, if you remember that an hour and a half ago now. And boy, I was hoping I could do this in an hour. That didn't work. But the Department of Agriculture also determines the food stamps or the whatever EBT card, the food subsidy. And so when they are on the one hand destroying your livelihood and derivative jobs and then cutting your food subsidies, they mean to hurt you. The same agency that creates livelihoods is also tasked with giving food subsidies, and they prefer food subsidies. They prefer you to be downtrodden. Should be a big notice to you. I've talked about this before. It shouldn't even be a thought. It should have been a revulsion that you started to move against. Don't get down on people that are on food subsidy. Get down on the local government for not insisting on coordination that starts the harvest again and the production out of the forest, the working, improving working forest that gives people the livelihoods they need to sustain themselves. Sustain, not sustainability, to keep themselves. There's nothing in the law that doesn't speak to environmental balance already when you start looking at how this actually works. And I've been trying to, and this is everywhere the same way, I've been trying to get you all to see this, whether you actually already know it or not, or whether or not you feel important to it or not. I'm using these as examples to show you if you can see these things as fast as I can, These things are seen in other areas, and maybe one thing you see that really does find favor for you to the wrong you need to be making right. This is how you attack it. This is the telltale signs it's hurting you or somebody else. This is transparency by definition. They tell you one thing and they mean absolutely another. I really hope you appreciate hearing this stuff if you hadn't heard it. Actually really apprehending what I'm saying about this. I can't imagine a more important point. It's why I come to these conclusions that maybe people don't really agree with me on. And again, to me, it's not an opinion. It may sound like it's my opinion, like when I talk about, like, we're going to move on to Bitcoin. It's the same transparency used against us there as I see they're using here in Perdue, underneath the fact that Trump and this guy is going to come and going to put America back to work. If this guy and this notice is any indication, we are SCROOD. And if people don't step up to stop this nonsense and correct it, we are SCROOD. They give you something that you need to feed on. They give you hope. And in every sentence that they're giving you, it's nothing but a lie. Now, I told you that was what was coming on, and part of my problem with this bit, I'm going to move on to Bitcoin. Remember, talk about starving, and they have control of the food stamps or the food subsidies to you, while they also have control of how many people they can get in the forest. See, private enterprise gets how many people can get in the forest under the good management, not the best sciences, but the sustained yield improving management of the forest determines by private access the productivity of these forests. These working forests, the conservation of these forests. Not the non-use conservation like we're lied to today, but the productive, continuing, sustained use and balance. And you can't have an environment that's only one lopsided because it won't last. It's not sustained. You have to maintain that balance in how you manage. These contracts are proper. These thinning contracts are proper, where you first do harvest and you need thinning to pick up the edges by contract. And thinning is not harvesting trees of marketable value. It's picking up the edges. Instead, they've got this whole dynamic flipped. When you go to the Good Neighbor Authority, these contracts are now the primary mover that they go to the governor to say, oh, it's okay, you can do that. And it's not. It's not consistent with law. And they can't keep up. So it's a lie right on its face. And the counties get beat down by it. Starvation is controlled by how this livelihood balance is made as well, and they can put people into poverty and starvation. It's the same agency with the food stamps or food subsidies. Listen to the next story about Bitcoin, how they now try to induce you and entice you, notwithstanding the price going up, and really giving people a sense that this is going somewhere. Oh, we're finally going to do it right. This is finally the time to come in. And I've told you about the conversation on the technology. I think it's cool. But these are tools. And you see all the same things. I predicted they were going to tie the Bitcoin to the need. And here they are. The next story. Bitcoin is all that stands between my family and starvation. Like, I look at this and I can't believe I'm actually reading it. Here it is. It's like, I knew it was coming. Here it is. It's like the women, children, and the indigenous right in your face here. And they go to a very real condition that was created by the United States and its financial policies to show you how now Bitcoin is the savior. And I don't doubt these people are being saved by it right now. But that's not why you're hearing this story in the future. Story starts here. I'm writing this post in response to comments I get from people when I try to explain what Bitcoin is. Uneducated people have told me countless times that Bitcoins are only used by criminals. I want to debunk the myth and explain how the real potential for Bitcoins is so much larger than the black market can ever be. Well, that's a big, bold claim that he can tell you what the real potential is when I'm telling you it's also your destruction, and I've explained over and over the elements on how that's coming to fruition, and you're hearing it now. I told you, every time they try to, the internationalists, the governance people, the future we want is not you, those people, Agenda 2030, they'll tell you that by some need of yours that somebody is getting benefit by these weapons they're going to use against you in the future. Bitcoin is literally saving my family from hunger and giving them financial freedom to immigrate in the near future. Boy, wasn't that 2030. No hope where they are. They're going to be moving is also the plan. They're telling you this is happening. My parents and sister live in Venezuela. A lot of you might not know exactly what's happening there, so here are the cliff notes. Now, I could go off and on. This is a political statement as well. This is the hard sell, how Bitcoin helps to save you in order to give it value. I'm not doubting any bit that Bitcoin is actually doing this. It is an alternative, but it's not what the purpose of this story is to get you to buy in and tie yourself into this thing I've identified by the words they use, like I just did in the Secretary of Agricultural statement, transparent to most everybody, the danger that this is developing to be. They went right on starvation. It's the same thing that the Ag Secretary is in charge with, and I'm telling you, he's saying he's not going to feed you very well. He's not going to let you feed yourself real well, and Trump just cut those benefits. Not a very consistent statement to me. I don't know about you. And here comes now, now we have a savior on starvation. We can use Bitcoin. This is the sign, folks. For as much as I think the digital technology that way is really neat, we are being set up again. And when I saw this story, remember I told you when the global governance technocrats want to get you to move somewhere, they will bring up the women, indigenous, and the children. My family, my sisters are starving. If it wasn't for Bitcoin, we'd be starved, and guess what? We also get to move the heck out of this place. That was set up by the United States to fail. Because the United States doesn't agree with the government that the people did or did not agree to. It's no different than the federal agency coming to your governor and saying, this is the cooperation plan we're going to give you, or else. Bitcoin is digital. Bitcoin is a technocratic tool of destruction. It's a weapon. I don't think people appreciate that. All the signs are on that it's on a promotion spin in order to get it to work. And people are falling for it left and right. Just like many people may have fallen, if they cared, to listen to Sonny Perdue's statement about how warm and fuzzy it's all going to be in the future and that they're going to listen to your voice. You didn't even understand what they did when they started listening to your voice. When what they were supposed to be doing is going to your local government, so the local government had the opportunity to protect you because it has the obligation and duty to do so. And you have the right to insist and or get rid of those people that don't. More importantly, you have the right and ability to go in and, when you do understand, to educate them so they can. Because I think a lot of people are willful, willful ignorant. Whether or not that's willful or not is time will tell when you engage them. But Bitcoin is a digital technocratic world tool. It's a weapon. You're here now. The hard sell is on. They're going right to the core. I told you that happens every time you listen to these global governance psychopaths trying to move and influence you to put the gun to your own head. And right together with that story, we have the digital consequences of our lives. The digital vulnerabilities come right up again, just to remind us. A Chrome bug that lets sites secretly record you, not a flaw, insists Google. As I told you, big data, which underwrites a lot of this, is going to be more dangerous than the government, and whatever we call, NSA and all that. But they play a part here coming on. Remember last year's Google Chrome bug that gave pirates a way to steal streaming movies? Well, they're ready. We're ready for a close-up, Mr. DeMille. This time we're potentially the stars of hackers movies. There's a Google Chrome bug, depending on whom you ask, that allows sites to surreptitiously record audio and visual, all without an indicator light. Again, just going back to the title, Google says it's not a flaw. This is all planned on you folks. So you engage these digital tools, and they are used as surveillance tools against you. They are you plugging into the system that was set up for you. It is you voluntarily accepting to be its victim. That's not taking responsibility. You are becoming part of that digital Borg. That's not their responsibility to have you avoid. And as I think about plugging in, I was encouraged a bit to make an account at minds.com to let you know I did. But it was actually, I think it was Free Enslaved encouraged me, because you'll see lots of people there that you know. Well, actually, I don't know many people there. I'm not into all that. And Circle said, asked me if I was about being a social butterfly, which I'm not. I still barely was able to deal with that. It's apparently a new website. But Free Enslaved kind of convinced me a little bit to make the account, only if to preserve the name against encroachment. And so I don't know what I'm going to do with that thing. I don't even understand it, but there it is. For those of us, we'll probably figure out how to get. I'll probably figure out how to get some links onto it. But we have a new access port. Again, plugging ourselves into that system, right? So I've done it. It's not like I'm away from it. I've taken some look at it. I've anticipated some distance on it. But it's just another contact point. Right now, getting you the information is more important yet than the risk that it is to be known about what we do, or the vulnerabilities it claims. So these digital world they allow us to plug in, and then they will treat us. And I have no clue what that site's going to do. I don't like some things about it, but it's not about that. For me, it looked like preserving the name behind the Woodshed as a content provider was as important as anything else there. So that's my excuse, and I'm sticking to it. So this digital augmentation is what they're pushing us through. They're getting us into the controllable cashless society. They're doing it by this transparent deception that really is sneaking underneath the perception of most everybody, even a lot of people that think that they know, and even people that would maybe even disagree with me. We are seeing that develop over time, really, and actually pretty quickly. That this hacking condition is not much different in my mind than editing. And so I move over now, because we move into a digital condition, a digital biological condition that's right coming in the news this week. We've heard a little bit of the parts of it, that we are getting tied into this digital matrix even more. And the technology is on the horizon to do so. And they're hacking, they're hacking the biology in this genetic modification. And so we are being hacked in the digital world, and we're being hacked in the biological world. Again, fascinating things, but it's the collateral things that we need to look at, the collateral maybe damage or the collateral consequence that we tend to not want to look at too closely. That this hacking has never, in my mind, been in any way been a good thing, and yet we continue somehow to let that be a transparent violation against us that we continue to agree to. But the study now comes out, hacking our genes. And I told you this before, my main problem with gene splicing or cutting or whatever, modification, is that I have not found any scientist that I've asked over time about the collateral consequence of invading a cell by any means, and the unintended response the cell does in protecting itself. How wonderful this creation is, this device is, the creation of this life. It has a defensive mechanism in it that when you invade it, it will now produce certain different chemistry or conditions to protect itself in the future for all time in the future. And nobody wants to talk about this. I've never had anybody explain this to me. They want me to find the study that they exist. I got my information before the internet, when they were first starting about the possibility about gene editing. Study now comes out this week to confirm what my questions are, and it's already now confirmed. I don't need to ask anymore. You need to know this, because this ties into an interesting consequence as I move through my tabs now, to move us into the digital, from the digital hacking and the dangers of that and being actually planned by someone, into the biological hacking, and that's being planned by somebody. And the promotion is that this CRISPR, this CRISPR technology, this CRISPR gene editing technology, is the go-to thing, and no one talks about whether or not that's actually the good thing. And I've been saying no, it's an invasion of a cell. There's a problem with it. Well, here's the study. CRISPR gene editing ignites tons of unintentional genetic mutations. Okay, there it is. This hacking, no matter where we go, is going to have unintended genetic mutations, whether that's digital or biological. So, to me, this is really huge, and for Trump fans, a huge study to understand. CRISPR-Cas9 gene editing has been hailed as one of the biggest scientific breakthroughs of our lifetime. The technology is often called molecular scissors for its ability to cut and paste pieces of DNA, thereby removing unwanted traits and replacing them with more desirable ones. CRISPR, C-R-I-S-P-R actually, and I don't remember what that mnemonic means. I said it before. Not important. You go look it up. Very, very fascinating technology nonetheless, but is being celebrated for its accuracy. But a recent study sheds light on some of the imperfections surrounding the technology that we should be aware of. When researchers of Columbia University used CRISPR-Cas9 to correct blindness in mice, they found that the process did successfully edit the gene responsible for blindness. However, it also caused unintentional mutations to more than 1,000 other genes. It's exactly what critics of the technology have been worried about, that in the process of fixing part of the human genome, scientists could actually wind up doing irreparable damage. Irreparable damage happens to be an injunctive cause, folks. Isn't that interesting? Those terms pop up. I won't read any more. That's all I need you to hear. That my concern, and I guess I've been one of a group I didn't know about because I hadn't heard anybody else really talking too much about this. Unintentional mutation. It's a different thing for me, not just mutation. They're actually agreeing it mutates genes. I'm saying it actually creates another process in the cell that the cells themselves defend themselves against any further condition. Whether or not they're capable is not the point. The point is they're making chemistry or biological decisions based on this invasion. All right? So this, now we see actual genes are getting mutated. It still doesn't speak to my concern. And so, word to the wise about this thing. Now consider the genetically modified organisms that they use to make your foodstuffs into feed we've been talking about. How about those for your vaccines? What's going on all there? It sheds, to me this is, what can we say, blockbuster, landmark awareness now? This is strictly on what my main cause, until I could get this answered, I couldn't go beyond, that I think is answered right here. Now we'll have to probably see much more things going on. I'm sure there's going to be an attack. This is really all I need about this technology. But let's move on about how they're hacking biology and where this could go by what the news is and where they've said it wants to. The technocrats want to see us go as they hack our lives and hack what we use in our lives. And you can, right now you have a choice not to. Pretty soon you're going to be like this dragonfly, that you won't know that, or you'll be programmed by birth or your vaccines to accept this. That we now find, and we had this story before, long time ago, that they were going to actually cause insects to be drones. Now we have a video that shows the maiden flight of a cyborg dragonfly. Cyborg dragonfly, a real dragonfly. See, we're not smart enough to figure out how the mechanics of a dragonfly actually works to make a mechanical one. We're going to actually tap into a living insect. And at some point, I know it's just an insect, but I still love you crickets. I don't want you to be doing the crickets. I want you to be standing up. I don't want you to be an animal like this. But you might be already obsoleted by the dragonfly, because it flies, it goes fast, and it don't make much noise. So your use as a cricket even now has been diminished by this fact. But what are they doing? And I have to say, big tough guy that I'd like to think I am, not so much. But taking responsibility as best I can anyway, standing up where I can, the little guy that I is. I saw the video, and I didn't like watching the dragonfly carry the payload on its back. And it wasn't because it was carrying a payload. They put electronics on these insects, which are capable of lifting this technology. It's so small now that it can fly around with an instrument package on its back, which is this communication device, eyes and ears, and it's a cyborg, remember? It's got its control mechanism that's wired into the insect. And I don't know how you're going to feel about it. Some of you may not care. I did not get an overwhelmingly good feeling watching a dragonfly in the video in slow motion, taking off with this payload on its back, belaboring this thing as it is flying, folks, but knowing that that battery pack was controlling its function to fly. Gave me a very, even for the insect, folks, gave me a very sad feeling. Over the past few years, a variety of cyborg animals have been unleashed as scientists kit out cockroaches, locusts, even turtles with electronic accoutrements. Back in January, researchers from the Charles Stark Draper Laboratory and Howard Hughes Medical Institute outlined plans to fit dragonflies with tiny electronic backpacks, allowing them to be controlled remotely. In the new video, their cyborg dragonflies have taken flight for the first time. The animal kingdom is a fertile inspiration ground for new technology, but it's difficult to properly mimic the speed and maneuverability of a dragonfly or the complicated olfactory system of locusts. Rather than designing robots and sensors from scratch, scientists have developed ways to take advantage of the hard work nature has already done by equipping live insects with electronic systems. In the new video, the team has revealed how the solar-powered backpacks are attached to the insects, briefly shown the Dragonfly, I-Y-E, Dragonfly, the I, Dragonfly, taking wing for the first time. They literally take and they plug in electrodes into this dragonfly, and they command its system to fly. The dragonfly is helpless to this. It just exists as a life form. A fascinating technology nonetheless, but this dragonfly is being remotely controlled by this battery pack. Now, the other thing I told you, it belabors in the flight, which means they have to reduce the technology. New technology coming out. Material science is a fascinating thing. It's really got me thinking back when I was doing R&D that our limitations are always the materials that we're working with. Now, scientists construct a stable, one-dimensional metallic material. Fascinating discussion on a material I've always been interested in, beryllium. They found out at the nano level, a single-dimensional level, the beryllium acts different in a single level than it does at a dual dimension. It changes its state of operation. Beryllium is a semiconductor in a two-dimensional state, and it's a metal, strictly a conductor in a single-dimensional state. Fascinating idea. My point on this is the belaboring dragonfly will now have new technology which lightens its load so that scientists can control it more efficiently and lighter, less work. All right? So the technology is coming to make these devices so small that they can control even turtles. And I'm going to tell you, we're here behind the times on all this, folks, on what they're really controlling. And we heard about it before. And we heard about it talking about the soldier. And so all y'all that knew about that know where I went. But we don't even have to talk about that more. They're going to make these cyborg soldiers to make them enhance them, right? Enhancement is one of these methods of the technocrat. Remember that word, enhancement? Modernize, another one of those. So we have now an instrument package on a dragonfly, literally causing it to fly. The dragonfly has no control over its own function in that regard. It has an instrument pack that acts as all kinds of things that drones do. It's a literal living drone. Now, we have a problem with the cyborg soldier and the human and the turtle, but we have how do we make it function and interrelate the digital hacked world with the biologically hacked world? Up comes a new technology now that they've been working on. Certainly it's beyond this, but we're told now genetic logic gates. Genetic logic gates. All this stuff is just fascinating to me, folks. I just love looking at it. But you understand when we see the little dragonfly being controlled, its actions are being controlled remotely. That they need a way to interface these packages to make them more functional biologically. This report about how they're doing this to cells, they create cells to be logic gates. Your computer is created by logic gates. The picture says with the title, and I want to get to this point because the title says the important part, A student's conception shows connections between biological-based CRISPR-Cas9 NOR gates. CRISPR-Cas9 is being used as a technology. Remember, we've now got a study that says that it has 1,000 mutated genes happen when they do this to these cells. And I want you to put that right in the back of your mind for a moment. As we understand that they're now creating biological cells that act as logic gates to be programmed. Researchers at the University of Washington have demonstrated a new technique for digital information processing in living cells. The method described in the paper published in Natural Communications uses pieces of synthetic DNA to form the logic circuits controlled via the CRISPR-Cas9 system. I won't read more. It goes into the logic of a NOR gate and all this. Like they used 4 or 5 NOR gates together to create an input. They say that the yeast has 2 input sections on its natural or biology, and it has 1 output they can use. They can build these things together. A cell, folks. They can build computers now biologically. Where does that go? Well, haven't we been hearing all of a sudden the last few months Elon Musk saying he's going to make an enhancement for you so you can tie into a digital system? What better way to make the biosynthetic neural interface than actually having cells that can do that? In other words, the biology now is being adjusted so it can be also analog, the biology, the life, and digital. An interface with your external digital world. I told you folks the Matrix was not a movie. They're not going to even need the little stick in the back of their head, the little connector in the back of their head. This is so much more advanced. They will now make cells that are computerized, have logic interfaces, which biologically can interface with the digital world. I don't think that that's a question to them. I think Elon Musk takes on technology that can be applied. Where I had to wait for the material science to bring me the material, Elon Musk already knows this is possible, and that's why he's telling you he's going to be the first to pull that off. They're going to make the cyborg soldier, if they haven't already made one, or a whole troop of them. And they're doing it as a biosynthetic interface. Fascinating. I'm just blown away, but I get creeped out by it. Let me go back to the hacking. What happened with the CRISPR-9 that they're using tells us there's mutations in the cells, doesn't it? Let's go back to the hacking physically. We can hack systems. We use CRISPR-9 to hack biology. We use malware to hack digital functions. Here's an example of one of those things. Can the heart be hacked? Experts find 8,000 security flaws in Pacemaker software. To my horrors, folks, this is one of the RDE projects I worked on in the 80s. Was a programmable heart pacemaker. We were the first in the world. We didn't worry about hacking. It wasn't that type. They've got them so sophisticated now. We were the first to be able to do that. But they now have these things so sophisticated that there's now 8,000 software vulnerabilities in a pacemaker. Let me bring you back to that little Dragonfly. That Dragonfly happens to be a cricket. Because you accepted, in your voluntarism, you accepted to be enhanced. And then they got the software vulnerability in the digital side that can hack you 8,000 different ways. And then you didn't know you have the biological vulnerabilities in the 1,000 different mutations in your cells. And I want you to look at the world when you have this kind of an interface in someone who's deemed to be a soldier and believes themselves to be advanced. And then one of those mutations or a group of those mutations start to trigger on a soldier that was otherwise supposed to say that you were told that they were going to protect you. The Dragonfly that becomes the soldier man that's out there flying on his little machine and coming after you. And then something goes awry in that genetic mutation. Am I looking sci-fi again, folks, or has that been told to us, and this is now the technology on the cusp they're letting us know? I'm creeped out because I think it's right here, folks. This is really, really interesting, but it's very, very scary. And I don't mean fear-based. I mean these people are actually working to this end. And when you see the transparency I talked about for the first hour and a half, right in your face, they're talking about all the warm and fuzzy what they're going to do for you, and they're actually choking you out as a people. This, and the detriment that I see, and the little disclosures they're telling us, it tells us really most probably all we actually need to know. That I'm back to the broken record. If you don't start getting it here, folks, and start figure out ways to move against the transparent attack, we're pretty much, all of us in the future, those of us that continue, are not looking at something that they can predict. They are not looking at a peaceful life. It'll be sold to them as a peaceful life, but it'll have been determined by these, I don't even like calling them elites, these psychopaths, who believe that their view of the world, their worldview, is the one that everyone else shall have. And they're dealing in the fantastic sciences that minds man can create in divorcing themselves from possibly the reality of the consequence. And they don't look at the consequence. And the consequence is costly. The bottom line is the problem. And you are expendable. If that insect can be plugged in, they're going to come, and they're going to come in the future like, oh, my family was starving but for Bitcoin. And they come, but these quadriplegics need to have their mind controlled so that they can walk around. Who are you? Who are you to deny that in them? That's the innocuous one. That's the way they get it snuck in. And in fact, they've got armies of people that are going to be acceptable. Remember, they give you an injection, change your DNA, might make you more receptive. See, these dragonflies I forgot to mention, they are genetically modified dragonflies to receive this type of connection. Remember, the vaccines seem to do the same thing. They strip your genes around and they make them mixed up, and they do something to you. What if that was for your little one in the future to receive this biosynthetic neural connection? They're going to take that phone out of your pocket and stick it right upside your head, folks. You won't even know it's there. It'll be a part of your body. Any cell can be reprogrammed that they can put into you. And then you talk about this, I can't remember now, those stem cells. Think about those now, folks. Think about what they're actually working on behind the scenes. This is terrifying at one level, fascinating at one, but terrifying. They're making the future they want. Not we. They say we. They don't mean us. And they're doing it as transparent to you as most of you, I would suspect, when I read that letter from Perdue, did not understand what you were hearing. And hopefully you stuck around to hear how I went through it. I didn't even go through half of what I could say, maybe even more. The deception is so clearly seen, and it's so easy to destroy once we understand where they're going with this and how. The how is their Achilles heel. You can make all the excuses you want. You can disagree with me all you want. But more of us that are not taking this to task, wherever we find it, is that other part moving forward. We're going to be invaded. We are invaded right now like nobody's business, transparent to us, and they're doing things to our society. They're rewiring it so that we accept the inputs of the future that it then admits into, that voluntaries itself into it. Has no clue about the danger that it's seen. Thank you very much for tuning in today. I hope something I said it really gets you fired up enough to go do something with it, and maybe some tools to see and hear how it goes, learn to discern. Grimner, thank you very much for all the work you do at reallibertymedia.com and for the blogcaster and all the archives, and we have freedomsnetwork.com for a social network that you can join up, folks. Do that. It's a pretty open place to go engage. Jules, UCY.TV. I'll get it right this week. I got it wrong last time. Thank you very much on your recast and broadcast, and then and all that you do there for the broadcast to get it syndicated out. Any terrestrial broadcasters out there, appreciate what you do. And folks, just get involved and take care of it. I'll be here next week, tech diffs and nature willing.
Well, that's another lesson. I hope with today's information you can take it to those that misbehave. From behind the woodshed, leaving his mark on the beast, this is Hal Anthony. Till next time, journey with purpose.
a can of whoop-ass feels like.
Son, you just opened a whole case of whoop-ass.
Hey, this is JJ Inc., and when I'm on planet Earth, I listen to UCY.TV.